Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Berman, host of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. Thanks so much for who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do it. Today, we have a very special and very complicated show regarding the role of media and cybersecurity. We're going to begin with a very special guest, Kate Fazzini. Hi, Kate. How you doing?
How are you? How are you doing, Gary? Thanks for having me on.
You know, what a privilege. We were talking before the show, and you were the very first person I had the opportunity to get to know about 5 years ago during this crazy Forrest Gump journey when you were at the Wall Street Journal.
That's right. Gosh, I can't believe it was that long ago, but that was an interesting time, and it was great sitting down with you and hearing your story.
And so what have you been doing since that time?
So I had worked in cybersecurity for a number of years and had almost taken a break to be a journalist. When we met, I was at the Wall Street Journal. I went on to CNBC, and then during this incredible pandemic, I left and just hung out my own shingle, as they say, and been consulting. And I teach at Georgetown. I teach cybersecurity at Georgetown University, and I teach cyber warfare at Yeshiva University here in Manhattan, where I'm based. And I've been watching your journey too. You've been doing a lot, very interesting stuff.
Well, it's all about our guests. And speaking of which, let me introduce Lily Hey-Newman. Hi, Lily.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Great. What a privilege to have you here. You know, I was mentioning before we started that you actually helped me lose some weight because I listen to you when I'm working out on the treadmill.
Yeah, well, I highly recommend the Gadget Lab podcast in addition to this one.
Yeah, indeed. So tell us a little bit about your origin story.
I was a general interest tech reporter. I worked at Gizmodo and Slate, covering tech policy, consumer tech, emerging tech. And through that, I started doing some stories about cybersecurity, and I was really drawn to it and had the privilege of getting to do it as a beat at Wired.
You know, one of the interesting things to me is like, how do you decide where to start and what to pick out? I mean, given the myriad of things that are happening in the cybersecurity ecosystem.
Well, I think, it's very overwhelming at first. I certainly, remember my first few years only covering cybersecurity. That was a big question in my mind, and I sort of felt like I never knew quite how to answer that. But now I think it comes from what your best place to write about. What sourcing do you have that can really add something to the conversation? What new information can you share, and you sort of determine what you're going to write based on what can add the most to the discourse.
Indeed, and one of the proponents of that is Dan. Hey, Dan, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thanks. I had to unmute myself. How you doing, Gary? Nice to be here again.
And you have a very interesting role in this entire communications ecosystem because you represent cybersecurity clients,
right?
And you deal with folks like Lily and Kate. How do you decide what to do?
Well, yeah, they're among the many people we do work with. It's always a pleasure to talk with them. But for what I do, the story has to be good. I mean, we have to work with clients and try to help them put their story in the context that's valuable to the media and to readers. And that's really the gist of it.
Indeed, and that must be a very challenging thing to do as well, because everyone is trying to get their name out. How do you make the determination between kind of style and or substance?
Well, it's really funny when you walk to the RSA conference or Black Hat and you go into the exhibit hall. It's the same messaging for everybody. Oh my God, threats, vulnerabilities, risk. And how do you rise through the challenger there? And when we work with smaller companies, startups, and innovators, and it's how they differentiate themselves and how they do things differently. So it's like, here's a better mousetrap, and here's why it's a better mousetrap, and that's really what we work hard to make it happen.
Indeed. And speaking of people making things happen, hi Kim, how you doing?
Hi Gary, it's good to see you again. Thank you for having me back on as always. It's nice to be here. Sorry, I'm in a little bit of a transition. I'm super excited about. I am starting a new project, or a set of projects actually, called, part of it is called the Empire of We. It'll be a nonprofit. There's a lot of great things going on in the industry. I've been only in the industry the last couple of years. However, I've always been into tech. My friends are all techies and developers. And I mean, like, that's it, kind of just, those are the people that I am drawn to. I'm working on my technical skills. That'll be also part of some of the projects. So letting people know how to get connected, what they need to do. I kind of feel like a connector of people. And I think that we need to lift people up and kind of change the way that the world is handling cybersecurity right now. So I'm the crazy lady that's in, like, on an airplane and in the grocery store and in lines talking about cybersecurity and why you should care.
I would say you're inspired. I mean, not crazy. You know, there's every reason for all of us. There's a little bit of
sparkle of both.
Okay. Well, there's every reason for all of us to be thinking about cybersecurity. My goodness, just look at what happens every day. So speaking of thinking of cybersecurity, Avrohom, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Gary.
Yeah, and you have a very interesting journey, and you get to listen and learn from incredibly smart people on the Ask the CEO program, right?
Yeah, I actually have the privilege of learning from many of the industry experts that I interview on Ask the CEO, many business leaders and industry leaders. And we talk about all sorts of tech topics, including cybersecurity. So we talk about IoT and artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. And as you know, they all funnel into cybersecurity because that's the central focus of all these technologies. We've got to keep them secure.
Indeed. And, speaking of things that are changing right now, here's some real breaking news, like literally yesterday and today, about all this stuff with Facebook and everything. So, Kate, let me turn to you and see, what's your take on everything that's going on?
It's so interesting because in the class I'm doing right now at Yeshiva, we talk a lot about current events, and I had lectured on Facebook and social media the week prior to this announcement. And one of the things that I'm so interested in with what Facebook is doing here, that I think is just this emergingly enormous story, is that in all of human history, we have had a marketplace of ideas that was hashed out in in-person debates or in newspapers, and all of that was based on all these ideas going through people. And now, we have grown in this last 10 years this social media empire where, in fact, sitting at the middle of that marketplace of ideas is an algorithm. It's a machine, and there's no longer a human really involved in that process at times. And it's really interesting what Facebook's doing, because I kind of wonder too, are we all becoming these hybrid sort of, not to be a little bit too Southern California about it or something, like never mind, but are we going to become this sort of hybrid of ideas that are being fed through a machine, as part of that process? Like, what is that doing to us? I think we can kind of see it around us. What happens, some unusual things and unusual behaviors. So it's buckle up, I guess, is my only on this one.
Indeed. And, so let me turn to you, Lily. This is incredibly interesting, the predicate of what she just said. And we have some breaking news. 26 words. No provider of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. What is that about?
So, this is a big topic right now about who is, where do we put the liability for speech online? And, if we remove these protections for tech companies, does that mean they're going to be sued into oblivion? And kind of what does that mean, especially for, small platforms and ability of smaller platforms to enter and kind of compete with these monopolistic behemoths. So in terms of the Meta thing, all I can say is it seems like Facebook is Meta. Facebook is very clearly laying out, and Mark Zuckerberg is very clearly laying out a vision for the future that he wants to see, which is more of Facebook's dominance and Facebook just kind of expanding the octopus tentacles farther and farther. Whether or not people want to subscribe to that vision of the future based on Facebook's track record so far is sort of another question. But that is definitely very explicitly what's being laid out here about Facebook and the metaverse. And the only other thing I would say is, Google has a similar naming scheme. Their parent company is Alphabet, and not all things that are Alphabet are Google, but all Google things are Alphabet. And as some other reporters also pointed out, on Twitter and elsewhere in the last couple of days, years later, we all still have to explain what Alphabet is on every reference in any story. And, you can't really put it in a headline if you want people to know that you're talking about Google. So I don't know if this is going to be the same situation, but, some of these brand names are just so, the recognition is so unbelievably entrenched that it can be kind of harder than these companies think to get the other name to take off.
Indeed, that's incredibly interesting. So we're going to now switch to the primary focus of today's discussion about cybercrime. Here's some, very compelling statistics put out by Cybersecurity Ventures. And, to make a very long story short, from everything that I've had the privilege of listening and learning about, this is not going away, anytime soon. Avrohom, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, as time goes by and more connected devices get added to the internet, we have more and more vulnerabilities on our networks. And the chart that you had up there that showed the cost of a data breach, those are real numbers, and that's something that we should all be thinking about, and how to protect ourselves and really start taking cybersecurity seriously. And if we take a look at the statistics of data breaches, we see that year over year, they grow exponentially. So it's something that, we all need to think about. It's not a matter of if there's a data breach, but when there's a data breach, and are we doing the right things to protect ourselves and to protect our clients?
Indeed. And on that note, Dan, you have a lot of clients in the cybersecurity ecosystem. What's your pulse of how their assessment? How are things going as an industry?
I think, there's all this technology out there to try to keep hackers out, to protect against vulnerabilities and various threats. But I think really at the end of the day, you have to protect your data. Data is very important. If I just talk to random people about cybersecurity, I'll ask them, when's the last time you backed up your phone? And I haven't done that in months. Well, do it now. Protect your data. That's really, really critically important. And there's also a distinction. We're getting into cases now where we had our first death attributed to ransomware at a hospital not too long ago, where a baby died because the hospital's network was overcome with ransomware, and they couldn't access the records they needed to make a critical medical decision, and a child died. These hackers are largely responsible for a death. I also think it's really interesting. The ransomware folks are very good at customer service. If they take over your stuff, they're really good about telling you how to make that payment in Bitcoin or any kind of cryptocurrency. It's just one of those weird things. The other thing is there's a distinction between cybercrime and cyber warfare. I chat regularly with Congressman Lou Correa, who is the Disneyland's congressman. He represents Anaheim and Santa Ana in Southern California, and he's on the House DHS subcommittee. He's an appropriations chair, and he'll contact me every now and then when something really big goes on to talk to my experts, if you will, about where we need to make sure our money is being deployed. And the question he asks every single time is, at what point does a cyber attack constitute an act of war? And the overwhelming consensus from the folks I'll put him in touch with, not necessarily clients, but just people I know in the business, that anytime it's an attack on critical infrastructure that results in significant injury, significant financial loss, or death or injury, and it has to be a nation-state player. So those are the two things that, I try to keep cybercrime and cyber warfare into separate categories. And we have legislation out there. I just wish there was more teeth to it.
Indeed. And, speaking of cyber war, Kate, I think you're probably uniquely qualified to talk about that because you teach it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things that we've observed for a long time is that, however you define it, and there's a real lack of a lot of war doctrine throughout the world that addresses the issue of cyber warfare, but we see increasingly that criminal organizations, tacitly with the approval of their governments, work hand in hand with military organizations or terrorist groups. So, when you're getting that ransom attack and you're paying that money into their funds, that could be a North Korean government, that is sponsoring that attack and that is taking that money and using it not only for cyber warfare, but for kinetic warfare. They're using it to help supplement their nuclear program, and the U.S. government has said that. So,
Yeah.
I certainly like to just remind clients that when they are in a situation where they have been vulnerable enough to have to pay a ransom, that yes, that money is going toward funding human trafficking and drug use and whatever else it is that bad things that you think are out there. And is it really, with that in mind, is it truly an acceptable risk that you don't mind being covered by insurance, or do you want to take the extra step to be prepared beforehand? I think we probably aren't long away from having a government that says no more to ransomware payments for that reason. Eventually, that will become an outrage enough. That's my opinion on it.
Well, that's a very interesting segue because, there's a lot going on at the White House right now. And I, for one, from everything that I've listened and learned about it, am optimistic about the new leadership, at CISA, at the White House, at the NSA. There seems to be a shift in a positive direction, as exemplified by the strategic intent statement that came out from Chris Ingles just yesterday. Lily, what's your perspective on the government's, the whole of nation, I think it was referred to, response to cybersecurity, cybercrime?
Well, I would just say, I think we're sort of there's been a lot of positive momentum. There's a whole sort of public-private ransomware task force. So that was stood up, I believe, in April. This communication is vital. I would also just say it feels overdue, and that there's a lot of catch-up that's happening now. So I think it's all great and important work. It's just there's a lot to deal with at this point to kind of catch up. And I wonder if Kim would want to weigh in also on that.
Yeah, I absolutely believe there's a whole lot of work to be done. We're kind of behind on the times, just partially due to bureaucracy in the government. Also, we should be teaching this in school. Like, this should be part of our educational system. We should not be waiting for the government to tell us to be secure. You don't wait till somebody breaks in to get an alarm system. You kind of say, okay, I'm going to teach my kids to be safe on how to cross the road. So we should be kind of taking this a little bit ahead of the time. So, I mean, it's good that we're starting that conversation. It's starting to happen. And I'm happy for that. But yeah, I think we definitely are a little bit behind the curve for sure.
And coincidentally, I was just on a call this morning. We're partnering with the National Institute of Cybersecurity Education, NIST, on a K-12 poster contest where we send out a national sort of opportunity for kids to submit original artwork about careers in cybersecurity to create posters. And we're, in addition to little monetary prizes for some of them, we're going to immortalize some of the winners in a future edition of our comic. So that way, they'll have something for the rest of their life, which would be pretty cool. Avrohom, I know you have to run shortly. What else would you like to share with our audience?
Yeah. So what I'd like to share in terms of cybersecurity, we had talked about ransomware. and some of the devastating effects of ransomware, as well as some of the discussions about paying for ransomware, not paying for ransomware. And I just want to share a little bit about some of the complexities that are involved with the decision whether or not to pay for ransomware. So there's a misconception that if you are backed up, then you're good to go. Let the threat actors choke on all their data and you go your merry way. Some of the challenges that businesses are running into when it comes to ransomware is that it's not about whether or not their data is backed up. It's about whether or not their customers' data will be exposed to the world. So, because of that, we really need to, like Kim mentioned about, educate ourselves and really learn about cybersecurity and understand the ramifications of what happens if there's a data breach and some of the damage that it can do.
Indeed. And, speaking of which, Tyler, you have a very unique perspective on the damage that can be done, especially from your work at the DoD. Can you share with our audience a little bit about some of your perspectives on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, ransomware, all of the cyber attacks that we're facing right now, it seems as if it's just escalated to a point, but I want to read a stat that I found. This is actually a really positive statistic as far as I'm concerned. So the Pearson Institute and the Associated Press did a poll. They showed that 9 in 10 Americans are at least somewhat concerned about hacking.
Wow.
2/3 of those say they are very or extremely concerned. I've been doing this for 20 years, and this is the first time that people are starting to actually take notice and really trying to put these cybersecurity protocols in place because, I think like Avrohom had said, we are more and more and more and more connected as each year goes by. And when you're that connected and that reliant on all of this technology, it just opens up more vectors for attack. So the solution is really a combination of really understanding your security posture. It's also cybersecurity awareness training, but it has to be changed a little bit because I'm sure all of us have taken cybersecurity awareness training and, we see, if you click this link, you could be letting your company into ransomware.
Right.
But it needs to be done in a way that's much more personal, such as if you click this link, you could be allowing hackers into your home and give them full access to your daughter's video camera, your baby monitor, etc. Because then people take notice. And frankly, the same exact techniques that you will use to protect your company are the same exact techniques that you use to protect yourself and your family. So it's really changing that narrative. And I do think that, the government is actually taking this seriously because we're in a crisis situation. We are very reliant on this technology for everything, and we have to protect it. And at some point soon, it's going to have to be a role for every single job. It's going to have to be something that is part of every job, that you have to have an understanding of cybersecurity.
Indeed. And, one of the contributing factors to the data that you were talking about is that some of the recent attacks, such as the Colonial Pipeline, actually affected real people at the gas pump, the JBS meat hack. Don't mess with Americans' meat, right, Lily?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about what is the line between cyber criminal activity, what becomes, like an act of cyber war, something like that. And I think it's not sort of a casual thing, but certainly, as others were saying, as sort of these adversarial situations escalate in different geopolitical situations, an attack such as one of those that has an impact on critical infrastructure, vital, services, something that could potentially cause loss of life, things like that, you start to see how acts like that can be, sort of the match in the tinderbox or whatever, or, that it sort of becomes more real. And, just quickly sort of Russian cyber activity in Ukraine, has been an example of sort of, something that could be called cyber war, or, is right there when there's also other geopolitical instability and conflict. And then you just sort of slip cyber in as like another element. So yeah, it's really startling to see all of this progress.
Indeed. And Dan, in addition to the things that are affecting people in an everyday life and critical infrastructure, there are things that are not designated like critical infrastructure, such as milk. Yesterday, there was an attack on Wisconsin, manufacturer of dairy products and things like that. So now the ransomware criminals are really starting to look for points of vulnerability in American life, right?
Yeah, I mean, that affects the supply chain. I just hope the hackers aren't going after the cows. That's all, We'll see how it goes. But, people are affected by a variety of things. I mean, I took a call from my son's fiance the other day. She got a email from Norton suggesting she owed them $600. I go, oh, look at the guy's email. It's a Gmail account. No, it's not Norton. But let's call the 800 number and have a little fun. Okay. So, and just you get the money. Have you received the phone call from the IRS or from the Social Security Administration? Oh, I love having fun with those guys. All right. I'll just drag it out. And well, what's your Social Security number? Oh, you called me and said there was a problem. You must have my number. I have a great time with that. And then when you get the phone phishing stuff that goes on, my people will. I did this at RSA one year. I got a call from a private ID number, right? And I answer the phone and I say, it's done, but there's blood everywhere. What should I do next? And they hang up, and that's it. So you have to have a little joy with this. I mean, people are trying to scam you, so I like to have a little fun and play them back. So
well, speaking of a little joy, Kim, why are you laughing?
No, because I do kind of the same things. Although I've had worse incidences of back in the days with the Craigslist ads. I've actually called the cops because I used to work in accounting and said, right. Hey, here's the fake check. I'm coming to have them pick up the furniture. Can you follow them, arrest them? And they're like, no, we'll file it. And so, but I mean, I kept these people going for like a week and just messing with them to see if I could actually make any progress, which I did. But, unfortunately.
There are oftentimes when people realize you work in cybersecurity and they get a suspicious email, they get a weird phone call. Is this real, legit? I mean, not for anything. I fallen for a phishing attack not too long ago. I actually had a conversation with an industry analyst about, you guys really need to do more PR to promote what you do. And then 3 days later, I got an email from that analyst with an RFP for a PR agency. I didn't think anything of it. I clicked on it, and guess what? I got phished. And he sent it back, and then I shared it on myself. Even if you're in this business, you can get snookered in. So,
now.
It is. It's amazingly targeted.
Now, Lily, you're shaking your head. Have you ever been a victim of a hack? If you want to disclose it.
I don't believe so, but I have sort of had that moment of oh, should I have clicked that or something like that? And I was just really appreciating Dan for sharing that story, because I think it's so important for people to understand that you're not the one who messed up when you click, because that's what it was designed for. It's set up where you succeed within the scheme if you click. So
if I had just had that conversation, I never would have clicked it. Well, I would have called them and said, are you serious about this? But we were just talking about it the days before.
Right.
Crazy.
Precisely. No. So, I just think that it's important to understand. And at the ransomware, going back to that, it's a similar thing with, how do we deal with the fact that, some of these attacks, all of the targeting and all of the attacks, they're crimes of opportunity, right? They're not spending multiple years trying to, perpetrate a ransomware attack against Oh, well, Kim's shaking her head, so maybe,
Well,
maybe there are, but typically I think it's profit driven. Like who has a easy vulnerability. So there's certainly a component, as Kim and others were saying before, of needing to proactively, everyone, these organizations needing to get really on top of their defenses. But ultimately, this behavior is not acceptable. Like everyone who's a victim should, this shouldn't be happening. Like, even if you have things that you should have fixed, I do think there's an obligation and a responsibility, on the part of organizations that hold this data. But that doesn't mean this behavior is okay. The ransomware actors should not be attempting this. And, so I think destigmatizing in general for both consumers and organizations, so they can feel comfortable coming forward and seeking help, is like extremely important at this point.
Indeed, and I'm really happy to be able to report that we have some breaking news of a ransomware criminal that has been caught. We're going to see if we get a picture. Yeah, that's Wilbur WannaCry. I don't know if anyone's seen that character before, but just kidding. He's one of our characters in our comics. We anthropomorphize hacks, as a way to make all this content, a little bit more interesting and engaging. And speaking of interesting and engaging, Tyler, maybe you can share with our audience what's next for you.
Well, I'm incredibly excited. I've had a very long cybersecurity career, and I am now moving into media, and I'm launching a brand new show on the Voice America Network starting November 3rd. And it's all about cybersecurity. It's teaching people really what they need to know now. So it's consumer focused, and Gary is actually going to be on it. And I'm incredibly excited to be, taking this next journey in my career.
And how can our audience get more information about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Cohen Wood, Twitter, Tyler Cohen Wood, and soon, I think by next week, TylerCohenWood.com.
Very cool.
Great.
Good luck. Break a leg.
Yep.
Awesome.
I hope I don't
Can't
break
wait.
a leg, but thank you.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, that sounds a little violent, but have a good show, maybe. So, Dan, how does any final words, and how does our audience learn more about you?
Well, you can reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at TechFlack and at MadAlexPR, to shorten Madison Alexander PR. You can find me on LinkedIn under my name, and also I do a website, which is the agency is named after my kids, because I wanted to have an agency with a work-life balance, if you will. Now, I know this is a show about media and stuff along those lines, and I've been a journalist. I'm married to a journalist, so I've got that perspective. So from when I work with clients, it's to help them understand that, listen, the reporter you talked to wrote a great story, but you didn't like the headline. Well, sorry, the copy editor wrote the headline based on what the story was. It wasn't the journalist. I try to tell them the first time you talk to a journalist is not the last time you're going to talk to them. And it's a relationship thing. So be trustworthy. Sometimes you got to give them something that you don't benefit from, but you're trying to help to educate that person. It makes you a security thought leader. And then now maybe they're not going to put a link into your story. Okay. They'll put a link to the research you did for the story. That will work. And on the media flip side, I really would love media that's focused on consumer cybersecurity to stop with the images of the hacker in the hoodie with no face, with the matrix data flowing behind them in the dark light room. One of the stories I love pitching like every couple of years is when there's a good summer of movies, sci-fi type stuff, and the little things that don't happen in real life. Like, for example, oh my God, a nuclear bomb is going to go off and somebody types in override password, and they do. No, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Or the other one is, somebody's in a darkened room and they're looking at a computer and whatever's on the machine is backlit on their face. No, that doesn't happen either. There was a James Bond movie not too long ago. I think it was one of the last Pierce Brosnan ones where they take a laser and sever some guy's hand and then take the hand and put it as a biometric thing to access a room. No, that doesn't work like that either. So the pitch for that story is it real or is it Hollywood? And it's kind of fun. And, every now and then there'll be some journalists that enjoys the story, and they get to go to a bunch of movies and get their popcorn and write it off as a business expense. And why not?
Indeed.
It's a fun story. So, and there are times when they get it right. For example, there was that movie Black Hat not too long ago with Chris Hemsworth, the guy that plays Thor in the Marvel Universe. Okay. Remarkably accurate in terms of how they do things. The only thing they did differently is Yubico had their authentication token in there, and it was a biometric key for the movie, but it's that token itself is not biometric. That was the only mistake we caught. But they do everything else very well. And the other thing that Hollywood does get right in cybersecurity is the show Mr. Robot with Rami Malek, who was in the Queen movie, Bohemian Rhapsody. They use cybersecurity consultants all the time, and everything they show in that program is accurate. My favorite moment was there was one of the characters dropped key fobs on the ground that had a virus on it. Yeah. And that's how we got Stuxnet spread to the Iranian nuclear program. So, it's just, wow, that was pretty cool. Everything you see here can happen. So something will be on, and can they do that? Yes, they can, because they hire security experts to do all that stuff. So
it's kind of a crazy world, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
is
not believable.
Well, there are things that are believable and things that are not. And I have to say, maybe my first real exposure to the whole security space was the movie War Games, which we're going to date that now is 1984. Matthew Broderick was a kid, and that kind of like, wow, this could happen. And, it was well done. It was very simplistic. They were hacking for airline tickets, and my favorite part is when the government confronts them with all their hacking activity because, whoop, guess what, kids? You left behind lots of digital fingerprints. So
we're having to wrap up here. How do people get in touch with you, Dan?
DCHM at MadisonAlexanderPR.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Find me on Twitter at TechFlack, TECFLACK, or at MadAlexPR. I'm pretty responsive. The hard part is spelling my last name. So there we go. Which is why when I work in radio, I use Dan Roberts on the air.
Oh, that's funny. So, Kim, you're going to have the last word. Is there anything else you'd like to amplify for our audience, and how do they get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn under Kim Kennedy, and I am on Twitter at Bronco Bailey 303. I am actually going to be part of the Haunted Hacker 1-year anniversary podcast. It starts tomorrow for 24 hours, and I am finishing the publication for the special edition 1-year anniversary magazine as well for that. So I'm very excited. I'm always involved in a couple of different side projects and just helping the community voice their, get their voices out, lift them up. And, we have a lot to change. The way people look at hackers are inventors, they're innovators. We need to change the way we look at things in this world and make sure that we bring to light the positive. There are lots of good things.
Yes,
it's not all fear. There's a lot of wonderful positive things happening, and we need to kind of change that. And if we can work together, we can actually make a difference. And so that's part of my mission going forward.
White hats, gray hats, and black hats. Absolutely.
And how do people get in touch with you, Kim?
On LinkedIn at Kim Kennedy. As I think it's Kim Possible at the end, but my picture's up there. I have longer hair. And then on Twitter at Bronco Bailey 303.
Well, on behalf of a grateful digital universe, thanks so much for who you are and what you do and why you do it. And for our audience, check out cyberheroescomics.com. If you have something cool or interesting, just shoot me an email at Gary@cyberheroescomics.com, and we'll try to amplify what you're doing. In the meantime, stay safe. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.